So I am just going to dive into the presentation here. So like Nolan said, this is on kickstarting sustainability planning in your community. Hopefully you're already working on sustainability planning in your community, and what I'm going to share will hopefully be some resources that can kind of help you further some things, or hopefully introduce you to some new things that maybe you weren't aware of already in the state. So yeah, with that, I am going to talk about Michigan Green Communities. So Michigan Green Communities is a program that has been around since 2009, and the program is designed to accelerate environmentally sustainable actions by communities to enhance Michigan's livability and economic competitiveness in the 21st century global green economy. In gist, it is a sustainability benchmarking and technical assistance program. Any municipality is able to, or county is able to participate, and it's normally the local units of government that participate in the program. And like Nolan said, I work for the Michigan Municipal League, but we administer this program on behalf of all of our partners. So we have an MOU. These are all of our signatories. So that's 5 state agencies, the League, the Township Association, and the County Association. You don't have to be a member of any of those associations to participate in this. We're funded by EGLE and the MEDC. And so it's open up to any community statewide. I also should note too, if anybody has any questions, feel free to just drop them in the chat, and I'll either get to them as I'm going, or we can come to them back at the end, whatever makes more sense. So like I said, it's a technical assistance and benchmarking program. The benchmarking piece of the program is the annual Michigan Green Communities Challenge. This is a really simple online reporting form that Nolan was talking about, where there's 127 action items, which sounds like a lot. I promise the goal is not to complete all of those things, but based on how many action items you complete, you can receive bronze, silver, or gold certification in the challenge. And then that opens you up to a couple different technical assistance cohorts that we have based on whatever level you reach. And I'll dive into a little bit more too later in this presentation. But we also do networking. So we are going to try to work on some more virtual networking opportunities, but we also do some things at like the Michigan Sustainability Conference, the My Healthy Climate Conference, and all that good stuff. And also to kind of situate Michigan Green Communities in this like ecosystem of programs that's out there. So the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE, has this Catalyst Communities program. How many of you are familiar with Catalyst Communities? Just by like show of virtual or physical hands. Okay, a couple people. So Catalyst Communities is kind of where all of these states' sustainability work that is focused on local governments is kind of housed within within EGLE. And so as part of that, there's the Green Communities program, which is, like I said, administered by the MML. And then we also have the Catalyst Leadership Circle and Fellowship program that's also funded by EGLE under this umbrella of Catalyst Communities and relates to Green Communities. All of these things, just know that they exist in the same family of programs. So that's a very quick introduction of Green Communities. So sustainability is a really, really broad term. It's the way that we define it is that it is ensuring that the way that we act and set up our society and systems today meet the needs of today, as well as those who come after us. And so that's really, really broad. We can talk about sustainability in terms of finances, in terms of the environment, in terms of infrastructure and things like that. So a super broad term, but really kind of all encompassing. And so a couple things that I want to talk about, because there are some of these terms are used interchangeably sometimes, but they do have different functions. So a sustainability plan, like I said, is something that's going to be more overarching. It's going to be addressing environmental concerns, economic concerns, social concerns. But then you might hear about climate action plans, which that's really more focused on mitigating climate change, preventing it from getting worse through GHG emissions reduction and elimination. Hazard mitigation plans, those are specific plans about very specific risks to your community, environmental risks and, climate risks, things like that. And then climate adaptation and resiliency. So that's not focusing on, preventing climate change from getting worse, but it's what can we do about what is and what will be. So kind of adapting our systems and the way we do things to withstand changes in weather patterns. And a really, really good example. So here we have some folks from Oakland County here. Your colleague at Oakland County, Julie Lyons-Bricker, prior to being in Oakland County, led the Royal Oak Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. This is a truly incredible plan put out by a local government. Royal Oak did a phenomenal job. So it lays out both sustainability more broadly and also how they're going to reduce their climate emissions and achieve net zero by 2050 community-wide. The plan focuses on the following categories. So they have an energy and building section, water, mobility, green space, waste, as well as quality of life. And because this is a group of planners, I'm going to talk a little bit more throughout this about where kind of like zoning changes show up in terms of as it pertains to like meeting sustainability and climate goals. I have a link in there too, that little at the bottom there, how they did it. There's this really great webinar that EGLE did, and Julie just laid out the really robust community planning process that they went through to create this plan. And I see Rachel in the chat there. You worked with Julie on Royal Oak's plan, so you were in depth on this. And again, too, talking about sustainability very broadly, they identified in that plan the 3 pillars of sustainability being community, economy, and environment. And so this is just something that I would recommend if you want to take a look at this as kind of like a gold standard of what a sustainability and or climate action plan could look like. Royal Oaks is really amazing. So with this plan or creating any kind of municipal plan, where the Michigan Green Communities program comes into play is the Michigan Green Communities Challenge, like I was explaining earlier. So those 127 action items that I mentioned earlier are divided up among 9 different categories. So, and those categories are on your screen right now: planning for inclusive and lasting impacts, climate resilience and adaptation. We have energy, materials management, land use and economic development, health outcomes, protecting and conserving water resources, and mobility, and then community engagement is kind of the intent of that last category there. So the Michigan Green Communities Challenge can serve as a really good way to look at many aspects. I won't say every single one, but many aspects of what it takes to operate a municipal government, and really start to identify ways in which you can enhance sustainability or climate resilience and adaptation in your practices, in your policies, programs, as well as zoning ordinances too. So I'm going to highlight a couple of the action items in the Michigan Green Communities Challenge now that are related specifically to planning and zoning. So under the energy category, we have an action item where it's asking you to enable renewable energy projects on private property. And again, this is something where this action item is kind of meant to be very broad because we want to make sure that it makes sense for your community. We don't want to be too prescriptive in this program, but it's up to you to kind of evaluate whether or not the policies that you have in place right now, would meet the requirements of this action item. And then under the sustainable land use and economic development category, there's a lot of action items that relate to planning and zoning. And I'm not going to dive into every single one here, but they are around, implementing smart growth practices, removing barriers to density, allowing for infill housing, having ordinances around natural features protection, participating in the Redevelopment Ready Communities program. I would imagine most of you are already familiar with that, but if not, it's through the Michigan Economic Development Corporation certification program that also is tied to MEDC funding. And there's also, I mentioned that because there's a lot in there around planning and zoning that MEDC requires as part of that program. And then additionally, we have a couple action items in there around, allowing for local food to be grown and sold, as well as meeting the needs of your small farm and food producers and other food businesses. And then the last category where some of the zoning changes show up as action items is under the water category. And so what I have in here too is this supplemental green infrastructure guide. Our colleague here at the League, Jada Tilson-Love Porter, who I think most of you know, she updated and revamped this guide for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation as a guide as part of the Redevelopment Ready Communities program. And this also too has sample ordinances and things like that. So that's another really good resource that's out there. And yeah, that's something that we kind of point to as part of this program. And then outside of the zoning and ordinance changes and things like that, there are other action items that we suggest that communities do. Again, no action item in the Michigan Green Communities Challenge is required, but of course encourage that you do. There's also a lot of optional action items in there too that kind of depend on community size or community type. And so there's some things that just aren't going to apply to every community, and we recognize that in there. But some of the things that kind of fall outside of the, like, what might end up in your code and ordinances is putting into place policies that support what's in your code, as well as advance like environmental justice and whatnot. So one of the action items is around health impact assessments. So whenever you're going through, and which that term is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, is whenever you have a new development or a new program or policy, or even an ordinance in the community, requiring a health impact assessment to start to understand what the health outcomes might be as it pertains to maybe that specific development or decision that's being made. And sometimes when we talk about these like health impact assessments or environmental justice assessments, the idea is like, oh, that it's going to bring up a bunch of problems with whatever is being proposed. And maybe it will, but the other side of that is that it might actually show that there are a lot of really great health benefits to pursuing a certain policy, ordinance change, or even when reviewing like a site plan or things like that. So that's something that you can implement in your community to kind of help bolster the work that you're doing and ensure that the sustainability work that you're doing is sustainable. Additionally, we have an action item around environmental justice assessments. Again, I want to say too, I'm going to talk in a moment about where like all the resources for these things kind of live. But ensuring that people like that past harms are remediated in the work that your local government is doing is a really good way to ensure the social and economic sustainability of your community. And additionally, one of those things would be like a community benefits plan for whatever a new policy, ordinance, or even a new physical development in your community might be. And also too, we have some resources and action items around continual education. So, right, you can implement all of these really great policies and ordinances in your community. Like, for example, Lansing and East Lansing are looking at a FOGS ordinance, which is a fats, oils, and grease, right? To make sure that people are not putting things down the drain that they should be. But of course, we have to educate people so that they can actually properly comply with it and know that they're doing the right thing. So making sure that whenever we are putting into place, certain changes to our ordinance, also accompanying that with maybe like softer policies or programs that help the community reasonably and actually meet those goals. Okay, I see Ryan's question in here too on detail what metrics would be included in a health impact assessment. I can come back to that in a little bit. So we did actually put together a webinar on health impact assessments back in, I think it was November of last year. So at the end of this, I'm going to find that link and drop it in the chat, because that is something where the Department of Health and Human Services in Michigan actually has some really great resources on it. If you're familiar, I'm going to drop the acronym in there. It's called MyChat, the Michigan Climate Health Adaptation Plan, or program, sorry. That has a ton of resources on climate adaptation and specifically the health effects. So I am not an expert when it comes to like health impact assessments, but I know who to point you to. That's really my role, but yeah. Oh, and then thank you, Wendy, for dropping that in the chat too. But yeah, so there's tons of resources out there, both from the state, APA's got it. So yeah. Okay, so I've kind of outlined a few of these action items, the things that you would see in the Michigan Green Communities Challenge if your community were to participate. And so just really quickly, I'm gonna give you kind of like the logistics on how to participate. We are opening the reporting period from January 1 to May 1. And so it's a really simple online form. You go in, you can create an account or log into your account if you have one already. If you need help with the credentials, email me, I can help you with that. There's a really simple action item form. So it's just an online form. You mark whether or not your community has is in progress on an action item, whether you've completed it, you've not started it, or if it's just not applicable to you, because we do recognize that there's going to be things in there that don't apply to every local government type or size or, you know, things like that. So it's really simple. We don't require any documentation for it. If you say you're doing it, we believe you. Also, I am a staff of 1 on this program, so I do not have time to review all the documentation, and we'd rather you spend more time actually doing the things than reporting on the things. We also added a set of metrics last year, so that does include GHG emissions, things like tree canopy cover, bike lane miles, EV charging stations, water use, energy use, things like that. Those are all in that metrics section. Those are not required for certification, but it's a good way to kind of maybe track and set some goals around that. I'm going to pause for a moment too. Are there any questions on like the kind of logistics, the challenge itself, things like that? Anything that I need to clarify that wasn't clear already? Okay. So I've just outlined all this. There's 127 of these action items, pretty broad, but where you can start to actually drill down and get support for completing those action items, where it's like, okay, I don't know how I would actually start with a health impact assessment or an environmental justice assessment, or even like, okay, we want to implement some ordinances around non-point source pollution, things like that. But we need some sample language. So like I said earlier, EGLE has this Catalyst Communities program. I am going to drop the link in the chat really quick if I can grab it. Maybe not. Sorry, it's not letting me grab it right now, but I'll grab that at the end. So Catalyst Communities is this program that exists within EGLE, and it is basically a resource hub. So if you're familiar with the Redevelopment Ready Communities program and how they have that whole resource library on how to do anything that they are asking you to do as part of RRC, that's basically what Catalyst Communities is. And we coordinate with the Michigan Green Communities program so that all of those categories, those 9 categories I laid out earlier, those align with the 9 categories that you see right here in the resource hub. So the resource hub is organized to mirror the Michigan Green Communities Challenge. And then if you were to click on any of those and wanted to like get some more information on how to pursue some of those action items, we have, you know, a whole list of resources and community examples and also webinars where appropriate. Thank you, Wendy, for dropping that link in the chat. So yeah, so when we have webinars out there too, that's something that we're working on building out as well. So we kind of have this library that you can go back to and reference. So yeah, so with this Michigan Green Communities Challenge, all these action items, kind of a good way to just scan what it is that your community is doing and where you might want to go next. And this year we were looking at it and we're like, well, if a community has gone through and done the Michigan Green Communities Challenge and they've sort of, you know, reviewed, maybe they're tracking metrics, maybe not, you're pretty much like a quarter of the way there on a sustainability plan. So we took the Michigan Green Communities Challenge and we created a sustainability plan template for communities to use. So we have this whole resource kit that is online now. I'll have the link for you in just a second. But It's effectively a suite of resources that can help you both work internally and communicate externally with your community too, if that's something that you need some assistance with. So as part of this template sustainability plan kit here, we have an internal facing work plan that's built out in Microsoft Excel. So it takes all of those action items from the challenge, divides them up into all the categories, and then we have columns in there for, things like, which departments are going to be responsible, what kinds of resources you have or need, timeline, priority, all that kind of stuff. I'm also going to demo these for you in just a minute too. And then we also have a full sustainability plan template. And it's built in Microsoft Word, and it's kind of bare bones in terms of formatting so that you could add your own branding to it and things like that. But I'll go through the features of that in a moment as well. We also have a one-pager that is kind of meant to be like a high-level summary of some of your sustainability accomplishments, or it just kind of like as a way to maybe update the community, update your council or commissioners. And then additionally, we have a user guide to like go in detail on everything that I'm about to show you. But if you need to reference it later, we've got this user guide as well. And then the link there is mygreencommunities.com/plan. That link will take you to a page where you can download all of these resources. So for just a moment here, I am going to share, starting with the internal facing sustainability plan. Okay, can everybody see that Excel document right now? Yes, okay, just want to make sure. So we have this is a summary page within this Excel-based sustainability plan template. And so these are all of the Michigan Green Communities action items, all on one page. We also have instructions on some of these pages. They're going to show up in kind of an obnoxious spot right here, but it's just so that you can find it. You can delete it later or move it if you need to. But then we have tabs for each of these categories of action items. So P here is for planning. RA is for climate resilience and adaptation. We also have a link throughout. So like there's a user guide, you click that, it'll take you to the user guide. And then additionally here, we have the Catalyst Communities page. So if you want to go back and reference some of those resources as you're going through these things, then this will actually take you right to that climate resilience resource section of the Catalyst Communities website. Like I said, we've got just some customizable columns in here where you can identify people responsible, your timeline, funding sources, challenges, status, notes, all that kind of stuff. And so we've done this for each section. We also have this tab here. So for anything that you want to add to this, like for your own, if it doesn't fit neatly within these categories, we have an other section for you to customize it and make it your own. If you also have some action items in here that don't make sense for you, then you can also just hide them as well. And then the other kind of cool feature of this is as you go through and mark your current progress on it, just do a couple right here. It's going to tally up your points here in this summary page. So right here, the total points are showing there, the category points are in the rows there. So, and then the total points correspond to bronze, silver, gold in the Michigan Green Communities Challenge. The other thing that we added to this, because this is something important to be considering, we can't really focus on sustainability unless we're talking about the people that our actions are impacting. So we have a community profile section, and it is a way to do an initial scan of social, economic, and climate vulnerability, or like environmental vulnerabilities and risks in your community. So we have a couple tools here. We highlight the Neighborhoods at Risk tool, the White House Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, or the CJEST as it's known. It walks you through kind of a tutorial on how to use those tools and then where to kind of like plug in your information here. So in the sample here, we've got City of Jackson, grabbed a screenshot and things like that to help kind of support the overall community profile summary. We also have some additional recommended tools in here as well, like the low income energy assistance data tool, wetlands map viewer, wellhead protection, other risk factors, things like that. So you can go through and use those as well if you want to continue building out that community profile to make it very specific to things that you're facing within your borders. So any questions before I move on to kind of the next tool in this toolkit? Okay. So the other thing here that we did is we put together this public facing sustainability plan template. So this is all built in Microsoft Word because we know that that's what most local governments are using in Michigan. There might be a few of you out there using Google, but for the most part, people are using Microsoft Office Suite. So that's what we built all of these templates in. We have a little instruction page in here, right? So delete the instructions when you're working on this. But basically what this is it's a place to kind of copy and paste that information from your community profile into here, as well as the action items that you're working on. Some of the features that we included in this to kind of make everybody's jobs easier, because having been a former city staff member myself, anything that makes my job easier, I love it. So we have a template executive summary in here. And we also, there's a page here for priority actions. So here's kind of like high level summary of the things that your municipality or county might want to focus on. If you feel like talking about Michigan Green Communities because you participate, we'd love it. You don't have to delete it if you don't want it. But we also included a section on Michigan's climate impacts. So we recently did some work for the MEDC where we kind of were outlining all of this stuff, trying to put kind of together a summary document and some policy recommendations. So we took all of this, everything is sourced as well. So all of these, all the numbers and all the facts and figures in here are all, sourced and all ready to go. So you could easily use this and maybe even plug in some specific things about your own community. But this is, the climate impacts that we're going to be facing in Michigan over the next few decades. And yeah, then we have that community data profile. Again, you can just kind of copy and paste over the information that you put together in your internal facing work plan. And we've got placeholders for all of that in here. And then we also put together these action item like summary pages. So if you're pursuing, right, here's action item 1, just as a template, kind of again, a way to just sort of copy and paste that information over, but put it in a way that's more like a public facing document that you're going to report out on. And then at the end, we also have the metrics. Oh, and which, sorry, I failed to mention that we have a metrics tab in here too, where you fill out these yellow boxes and then it does all of the calculations for you on things like GHG emissions reduction, per capita water use, things like that. And so we have a section in here where you can add that to your template or to your sustainability plan. Okay. And then lastly, we have this one pager here. So this is an example, one pager of the city of Metro City here, just a little template demo piece here. You can actually do this in Canva if you're familiar with that platform. We have built this out in Canva, and again, there's links in the user guide and all that kind of stuff. If you don't feel like creating yet another account for another platform, we also have this one pager built in Microsoft Office Word as well. So the design on it isn't as nice and comprehensive, but it gets the point across. So any questions on that before I move on? Okay. So the next piece, because we need to make sure that everything here is advancing other goals. We have all of these incredible funding opportunities out there from the federal government. And so what we have done is with our partners at the Graham Sustainability Institute at U of M, they have built an IIJA and IRA funding tracker. And so there's the link there. Again, I can pull that up and drop it in the chat in a little bit. This tracker is tracking 153 programs between IIJA and IRA. If you haven't already seen this before, U of M has been working to keep this updated, and they've also already filtered out all of the programs that don't apply to communities in Michigan. So if it's in this tracker, it is going to potentially apply to your community. Additionally, we have mapped out this funding tracker against those 9 categories of Michigan Green Communities action items. So if you're doing Michigan Green Communities Challenge and you've set some goals, maybe within certain categories, certain action items that you want to pursue next, you can go through and actually filter this down to take a look at, okay, what kinds of funding opportunities are available to local governments and pertain to energy or pertain to like health impacts or water, infrastructure, things like that. So that's something we did. Any questions on that? Again, we can drop the link in the chat too to make that easier to find. Okay. And then just kind of a little summary of that too. So the IIJA and IRA tracker that I just went over from the Graham Institute. Additionally, the Michigan Municipal League had this Serve My City kind of like funding hub, and it was really just for Michigan Municipal League members to start, but with funding from the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, or LEO for short, we are building that out to be a statewide funding hub. If any of you are familiar with the My Water Navigator program, it's going to be built on that platform, but it's going to be including all of the federal funding opportunities and state funding opportunities out there. And the filters on it are very robust to help you kind of to make sure that it actually applies to your community and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so thank you, Wendy, for dropping these links in the chat as we go. Yeah, so Wendy just dropped the link for the My Funding Hub. That is a placeholder page right now. The actual site is in progress. We're doing the kind of final work on that, and it's going to launch in early 2024. I'm sure that the state is going to put out a press release. We'll put out a press release. There'll be more information coming on that. Additionally, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the Five Lakes Energy services that are out there. So Five Lakes Energy is a consulting firm based in Michigan, and they have received both state and philanthropic dollars to help communities with funding opportunities right now, federal funding opportunities. And so those services kind of include navigation assistance, right? So like, you know, what kind of our needs, what are our goals, and then try to match the funding programs to what your needs and goals are. Additionally, they will do some basic grant writing support. They're helping with some like administrative help. So, you know, there's all of the online government application systems, creating budgets, filling out forms on the government grant site. They will also help with modeling and data analysis, as well as project and strategy development. These services some of them are free, some of them are not. So they are asking for communities to contribute at least some of the cost with kind of the help that they're offering here, but they are offering pro bono work for projects that would benefit J40 communities. So whether it's, you know, your entire community is designated as a J40 census tract, or if it's just some of the census tracts within J40, or some of the census tracts within your community that are labeled, you know, potentially as a J40 community. So there's a link there again to this presentation is going to be sent out afterwards. So all of the links and more details are in there in the notes on these slides. Any questions on that before I move on? Okay, so
I think people are taking all of this in, Danielle.
Yeah, sorry, there's a lot.
No, this is a lot of great information.
Yeah, we try to, right now, my biggest push right now is we want more communities to be participating in the Michigan Green Communities Challenge, which I know that Oakland County already is. I know that there are a number of you that are probably already doing it. But also too, there is so much out there when it comes to infrastructure and climate funding. Anything we can do to help just sort of like siphon that information and point people in the right direction, that's what we're trying to do right now. So The other thing that I want to talk about today, if we've got the time, which we're at 12:37 right now, it's okay if I take a few more minutes to talk about some of the other things we do with Michigan Green Communities. Okay. So, not so much federal funding related, but technical assistance related. So we have a couple cohorts, and these are technical assistance cohorts. We have the accelerator cohort and the catalyst leadership circle. I'm going to talk about the accelerator cohort first. That is a program that we brought out of the Michigan Municipal League. Again, doesn't really matter who runs it, but just sometimes it gets a little confusing because parts of this program are divided up among different organizations. But just know that, again, you don't have to be a league member to participate in these things. The only thing that we require is participation in the Michigan Green Communities Challenge, which is again free, and we don't offer or require any documentation for things. So try to keep that barrier of entry low. But to participate in the accelerator cohort, you need to reach at least bronze or silver certification. Bronze certification is 20 points. And so each action item everything is weighted equally in the challenge. If you've completed something, it's worth 2 points. If you're in progress on something, then it's worth 1 point. So 20 points would be either 10 completed action items or some combination of in progress and completed. So, and then silver is 60 points. So, the accelerator cohort, basically what we do is think of it as running it at like, consider it like a semester, right? So we do monthly meetings for 3 to 4 months at a time on a very specific topic. We hire subject matter experts to come in and work on whatever the selected topic of the group is. We do a little bit of homework in between and some coaching in between. But ideally, what's going to happen is when you go through these monthly meetings for 3 to 4 months, you have a much better understanding of the topic that we're going over. You have some personalized tools and next steps. So there's some one-on-one coaching that's offered by consultants and subject matter experts, which I'll put this a little bit more into context in the next couple slides. But also too that we kind of inspire some more proactive and aspirational planning around these topics. So we kicked this program off, this cohort this year in January, and the first topic that we covered was green infrastructure. So this is kind of just a little outline of what the green infrastructure module included, but we contracted with, do any of you know the firm Drummond Carpenter, Don Carpenter, who's one of the principals there. We contracted with him, as well as Julie Beth Hines, she's a professor out in California, but she wrote this really great, basically it's like a green infrastructure audit guide, which is referenced in this supplemental guide to green infrastructure. But what we did is we kind of just Don covered a deep dive into like, okay, what are the types of green infrastructure out there? What kind of problems can they help you solve in your community when it comes to like stormwater management and things like that? And then we also did a light zoning audit with all of the communities in the program. So there were some kind of basic questions that we had laid out as homework. And then the task was to go through and kind of identify what your zoning ordinances specify as it relates to certain things. And so then the next session was going through that kind of like zoning audit and identifying ways that you can kind of improve or like tweak your ordinance language to kind of further advance your goals and maybe address some of the issues that your community might be having around water management. So, and we also did a session on incremental zoning, which you should all be kind of familiar with that anyway. But yeah, so that was kind of what we did there. And the next topic that we are, I was going to say launching, but we're working on it right now, is we are currently doing the next module, and it is on materials management. So in light of the Part 115 legislation being updated at the very end of the last calendar year, every county is now required to submit a comprehensive materials management plan that includes, not just, it used to just be, where are you going to go bury your trash? But now you also have to be looking at, it's going to require that communities of a certain size offer curbside recycling. as well as looking at food waste reduction, composting, and hazard materials, things like that. So we've contracted with Resource Recycling Systems, or RRS for short, and they are basically taking communities right now through a walkthrough on like, how are we going to comply with Part 115? How are we going to they're going to set some baseline measurements with the communities that are in the program right now. And then start to like identify ways that they can set some aspirational goals, as well as work with their communities to, you know, on the engagement piece of that, because as we know, these comprehensive materials management plans, while the county is responsible for creating them, they do require a 2/3 vote by the municipalities in the county for approval. So ideally, municipalities are going to be very involved with their counties in creating these plans. So we're just kind of offering a little capacity boost here in that way. Sorry, I see something in the chat. I see the question here on, does the new materials mandate also include a chain of custody requirements for waste? I do not know the answer to that question, but I can definitely point you to who does. And I can either follow up after this, or if we have a few minutes at the end, I can drop it in the chat. Okay. So the other cohort, this is what the accelerator cohort's doing. Again, that's for bronze and silver. We also have a cohort for silver and gold communities. Gold is 100 points, and again, silver is 60. It's called the Catalyst Leadership Circle. So our partners at the University of Michigan Graham Sustainability Institute are the ones that actually administer this program. They meet every other month, mostly virtually. And these are times where communities can come together for community sharing, peer networking. You have an audience with EGLE staff. They sometimes bring in expert speakers and do other kinds of tours around the state to just really kind of help deepen the knowledge there among communities and further that resource sharing. So the other really cool thing that they launched last year is what they call the CLC Fellowship. So they paired grad students with the municipalities in the program to just kind of tackle some, like the fellows are there for 10 weeks full time, and they tackle, you know, whatever kind of topic they source these topics at the beginning to make sure that the grad student like has that kind of area of expertise and things like that. But these are all projects that were identified by the community. So for example, on that screen, it's really small, but up in the far upper right hand corner, there's a demolition ordinance, or I'm sorry, deconstruction ordinance that the city of Ferndale, with a grad student, they did research on and put together like a phased in approach to creating a deconstruction ordinance as opposed to a demolition ordinance. Because as it stands right now in Michigan, anything that comes out of a construction site can pretty much just go right into the landfill. As opposed to a deconstruction ordinance, which would require that materials that a building be deconstructed when it comes down, and that materials either have to be reused, recycled, or turned into some new kind of product. They have not implemented that yet, but they now, because of this work with the CLC Fellowship, they have that roadmap in place, which is very cool. So the link is on that page, and then the contact information. Sarah Lee is the individual at the Graham Sustainability Institute who runs that program. It's really, really cool. This is, I say the Catalyst Leadership Circle is like creating the next best practices. The accelerator cohort is working on implementing best practices. So that's an overview of those. Any questions on those cohorts? Okay. I think that is about all I have here, but just want to put it out there. Next steps, leaving here, go create an account with MGC if you don't already have one. Oakland County, you already have one. Or if you're the point person for that, find your login credentials. You can download those templates, check out Catalyst communities, check out those funding trackers, and also share this information with your peers. So if you're participating in Michigan Green Communities, talk with your peers in other communities, because we'd love to get more involved. So yeah, now we have time for questions, and I'm also just gonna put my contact information up there too, if you want to grab that.
Yeah, and if you could maybe just, oh, you can't cut and paste, or
But you know, what I can
With
do
that.
really quick is this.
Just
I can just type it in really quick.
Okay, great. So, wow, that is great information, Danielle. While people are thinking about questions, one question I have is, so do you have to coordinate in a community in order to register? Like, do you have to have a team together? You can't have individuals just go out and do this, right?
Right, so it needs to be local government staff. We do have like, I will say that the city of Traverse City, if you're familiar with Eco Seeds, which is a nonprofit in the community, they are the ones who actually kind of like actually complete the challenge on behalf of the city, which is totally fine. Like, that's how Traverse City wanted to set it up, so that's how they do it. But generally it is municipal and county staff that actually complete the challenge. We just ask that the community has like one account that they tie the challenge data to, because this, I forgot to mention too, so this form, it saves your information year over year. So that when you go in next year, it's not like you're doing every single one over again. It's like, okay, I'm just going in and updating a few of these things. So yeah, definitely requires, like, I would assign a point person for it. And then that point person can kind of coordinate across departments to see, you know, what's been accomplished or what's in progress.
And is there a list there on your website or whatever of the catalyst or
Yes.
the MGMC or MGC communities?
Yes, let me grab that link really quick.
I think some people would be interested to see
Yeah,
who's out there. Maybe a little healthy competition.
yes. So yeah, we do have a list of the communities that are currently certified, and this is something that you do year over year to maintain your certification. But yeah, we have the list of the currently certified communities right here. There are currently 48 certified communities as part of the 2022 challenge. And we would really like to grow the program because we do, so those communities represent about 3.5 million people. But we also want to make sure that we are growing the geographic representation of the program, because the impacts to people matter, but also the impacts to the land matter as well.
Great.
And then the action items themselves, I can snag that real quick.
So questions, I know some of you are local government staff, but some of you are consultants. So it'd be really interested to know what kind of role consultants can play in this, I guess, encouraging their communities to do this.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we, so, you know, this toolkit really kind of designed for like local government staff, but I mean, we have no objection to like consultants using it if they wanted to use anything from that toolkit. So long as it's furthering, you know, the work of local governments here. I believe it is the city of Sterling Heights or Madison Heights. They recently was talking with them, and I think it's Madison Heights. They're working with a consultant right now in sustainability planning, and that consultant, because the city of Madison Heights has identified Michigan Green Communities as a priority for them, that's something that they want to pursue. Their consultant is kind of using the, you know, the challenge and the action items as a starting point for the community, helping to kind of set some goals for them there.
I think Rachel just had a question here for you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we revamped the Michigan Green Communities program back in 2021. We went from like, I think it was around 30 some action items to 127, which was a lot, but we wanted it to be more comprehensive, meet the needs of more communities too, because, you know, like, you know, for example, things around septic systems, right? There was nothing in there around septic before. And that's also something where not every community has septic systems. But so that's like an action item that's, you know, optional. If you have them, try to complete those action items. If not, then obviously don't worry about it. We do plan to make kind of like tweaks to the program. We tried to make it as comprehensive as we could. But I think the one area that's kind of lacking right now is food waste. That is something that is not currently like explicitly laid out in the action items, but that is definitely something, especially too, because it has been laid out in the My Healthy Climate Plan. And the Part 115 legislation to reduce food waste as a strategy for reducing GHG emissions. So we know that we need to do some work around there. To your other question though, what are some of the toughest decisions communities have to face when they're going through the MGC process? So we did a feedback survey this summer to try it like a program evaluation survey. And what we found was that we try to kind of identify like barriers to participation in the program. And the biggest barrier to participation, which I think is, you know, from my personal experience, really resonates, is time and resources. So like, right, yeah, I want to do that, but I don't have the staff time to do it. Or, you know, and it's mostly time, like there's no monetary resources that have to be put forward to participate in Michigan Green Communities. But yeah, generally just dedicating the staff time. But that challenge form, we try to make it really easy. But I think the cohorts, for example, it's, you know, it's another meeting on your calendar. And sometimes you don't always have time for that. But the beauty of the cohorts too is that you can drop in and out as you need to. So with the accelerator cohort, with those modules, we ask that you know, have at least one staff member who attends like every single meeting in the module, which there's only 3 or 4 depending on the topic. It's one time a month. And then the Catalyst Leadership Circle, if it doesn't work for you, no big deal. There's going to be another one in a couple months. Like it's kind of, we try to be as flexible as we can. Any other questions?
Oh, here we go. Oh, thanks, Rachel. So, okay, I'll interject one. So I guess this assumes when you register your community that there is some type of agreement in the community about pursuing these goals. So,
oh yeah. So
okay.
sorry about that. If I, yeah, so different communities do it different ways. There's no like council or commission like resolution required to participate in Michigan Green Communities. I think there have been some communities that have done that, right? So like the city of Troy recently has, they're investing a lot more in sustainability planning and whatnot. And I think they did do a formal resolution around, like around the climate crisis. I don't remember if Green Communities was referenced in that, but it is set out as a goal for the community to participate. So this is something where like, if you're a staff member in the community, like you can just sign up and participate. There's nothing barring a community from doing that. Again, I just, you know, make sure it fits within your time and things like that. But there's nothing that's like formally required on behalf of the city to participate. And we do also have that where, you know, City of Ludington, for example, it's a council member that's actually really the one who's engaged with Michigan Green Communities. Whereas other communities, it's staff members. So it's just, and then other communities, we also have like sustainability committee members that are, you know, they're appointed boards by the city or municipality. I hope I clarified that question.
Yeah, that's good. So Rory has a question here.
Yes. So when we revamped the program in 2021, we worked with, so I should say too, that the Michigan Green Communities is governed by a steering committee. So it's those 8 entities that I listed earlier, the state agencies and the associations. We also have 8 spots for community representatives. So Kalamazoo is on our steering committee, as well as a number of others. We have, you know, Village of Mackinac City, and we currently have 7. We do have 1 open spot right now. But we worked with subject matter experts when putting together the action items and revamping the program. And then we also vetted these by, you know, representatives from local units of government to actually make sure that, yes, these do fall within the purview of municipalities. So we did try to address that. There's some things where it's, I don't want to say it's like a stretch for a municipality or county to pursue it, but it may be something that doesn't fall within your normal scope. It might be like the creation of a new program or something like that that would help to, you know, advance the goals in your community. So, there is also a question right now around some of these things. So like in your question here, Rory, about, you know, the municipality adopting a greater regulatory standard than what's already at the state or federal level. We don't ask municipalities or counties to do anything like that. We would just point to kind of like the existing standards and the existing guidance that's out there. So no, we don't want to risk any lawsuits here. And at the same rate, though, if there are ways that municipalities can start to kind of push around those boundaries, though, if there is a need for, you know, greater regulation around something, this kind of is that spot where it's like, okay, well, this isn't working for our municipality. How do we work with EGLE, right? So you have that audience with EGLE through these cohorts, to maybe start identifying that and flagging that as an issue. I know in Detroit right now, there's some issues around, have been issues for a long time around air quality standards, right? So whatever the EPA and EGLE are requiring right now is still not preventing, you know, 700 people a year from dying of asthma attacks in Detroit. So like clearly there's something that needs to happen there. But what, I don't know exactly, at least a conversation. So yeah.
All right, Danielle, we're running out of time.
Yes.
So you are willing to share this information with everyone. So I can certainly email everyone who's on this call with the slide deck. Is that, yep, okay.
Yeah.
And then we recorded this presentation, so we will put this on the MAP YouTube channel. So I'll put a link to that as well. Any other last questions before we let Danielle go? Okay. I hope some of you are inspired to at least look into the resources. It looks like, Danielle, you can get to these resources without even going through the Catalyst communities. They're very accessible. So
Right.
I hope that people are able to find what they need.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time for, you know, to talk about what we got going on. So, and also to David, I will follow up with you on that chain of custody there too. So on that question there. So thank you so much.